Hello and welcome back to another week. I am so excited. Have somebody here who I've been following on Instagram for a little while and reached out. So she was kind enough to say yes, and I'm excited to tell you about her. So Alexa is a licensed psychotherapist in Texas, Illinois, and New Jersey, and is the owner of Relief and Recovery Psychotherapy in Houston, Texas. Alexa is a certified eating disorder specialist and helps adults and adolescents improve their relationships with food, body image, and exercise. She is especially passionate about working with dancers and athletes and also enjoys educating on mental health topics in the community. Everyone, please welcome Alexa Shank. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, what a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for your yes. So usually when I kick off the show, I like to ask people how we know each other, but I always like to save people from being like, I don't know you, you DM'd me. That's the answer. But I've been following you on Instagram for a while and finally plucked up the courage to ask.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did because I've been following you back, and so it worked out well.
Lovely, lovely. So well, let's just jump in. So tell me about kind of your journey to the decision to become a therapist.
Yeah, so my journey started back when I was a teenager. I had some of my own kind of mental health struggles, as do, so many kids, but my parents were really great and got me seeing a counselor pretty early on, when I was like 16 or so. And she really helped me, and I just thought it was so cool that there was someone whose job was just to like support me and listen to me, and wasn't like a typical parent adult.
Right, right.
And so, I thought, wow, like if this is a job, maybe this is something I would like to do. And so I kind of did some research, and I actually had some family friends who were in the mental health field, and I picked their brains and decided, I think I am interested in this. And so my senior year of high school, I took Psychology 101.
Excellent.
And of course, I loved it. I feel like everyone loves that class. It's just, it's so interesting. And so I decided, I think this is something for me, and went ahead and committed to majoring in psychology in undergraduate. And then along the way, my family friends kind of helped me continue to sort of narrow down what my options were. And I ended up taking some time off from school to pursue a career in dancing. I really
Mm,
wanted to become a professional dancer, kind of have it on my checklist. And
yes.
so once I did that, I decided, okay, it's time to head back to grad school. And I went ahead and moved forward with a career in counseling. And that's how I got to where I am today.
Amazing. And I have to ask because I know people are going to be curious. Tell us a little bit about your professional dance as much as you'd like to share, because I find that fascinating, obviously.
Yeah, so I grew up, from like the age of 3 doing all forms of dance, ballet, tap, jazz, hip hop, all of the stuff.
Right.
And then in college, I got involved with I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and they had a minor league basketball team that had auditions. So I decided to try it out, and became part of the Austin Toros. Now I think they're called the Austin Spurs, but they're owned by the San Antonio Spurs.
Okay.
And so, we did a lot of dancing and cheering, which was really fun for me to kind of get to do both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I had done, drill team in high school, so I had had a little bit of experience with like the pom poms and all of that
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I just really got into it, did that for a few years, and decided, well, the next step is San Antonio Spurs. And so I went for it, and I'm, worked really hard and made it. And that
Wow.
was just like such a dream come true. It was so much fun.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. I don't think I knew Austin had a semi-pro team. So now we all know. And of
Yes.
course, everyone knows who the San Antonio Spurs are, obviously. Yes, that's my husband is a San Antonio Spurs fan. He went to high school for part of high school and part of junior high in Bernie, which
Okay.
is,
Yeah.
obviously, and those the rest are like, I don't know what it's outside of San Antonio. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah, well, that is just amazing. And what a fun thing to do. And such dancing, gosh, so difficult and athletic and lots of movement there, obviously.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that piece of it as well. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about what made you drawn to working in relief and recovery.
I spent several years working at higher levels of care with eating disorders.
Mhm.
I've always worked with eating disorders. Being in the dance world is kind of what initially got me interested in it. I saw, you know, just a lot of kind of unhealthy practices going on, people doing crash diets. And I thought, like,
Yeah.
this would be really great if we actually had, professionals helping guide us into what's sustainable and what works and doesn't work. And so I knew that that was something I wanted to do. And so I started off my, career as a therapist working in various higher levels of care, and I got so much great experience. It was so much fun, but you work longer hours.
Mhm.
It's a big time commitment, and so I always kind of had it in the back of my head that I'd love to establish my own private practice where I'm not kind of confined by what insurance dictates to me as far as
Uh-huh.
treatment. And then I would get to really focus too on um, doing a lot of work with athletes because I noticed when I was at the center, those were the clients I was most passionate about working with when they come
Mhm.
in, was the dancers and the athletes and things like that. And so right around 2020, early 2020, actually, I went ahead and set up relief and recovery and just kind of went for it. I was like,
Amazing.
I think I'm ready. Let's
Uh-huh.
jump in. And so it's been fantastic just kind of getting to grow. And, um, of course, the pandemic hit around that time, but
Right.
thank goodness for Zoom.
Yes.
And so I was still able to keep kind of building my company, and here I am today.
Wonderful. I actually moved to Kansas, St. Patrick's Day of 2020 and
Oh
had
my
the same,
gosh.
yeah, had the same vision of like, oh, I'm gonna start a private practice. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, but technology does work wonders. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. I know some people are hesitant about virtual therapy. And I don't want to discount the ability to share the same space with somebody. And I also know that we've gotten very good at using technology
Oh yeah.
and how wonderful it is to be able to do something. I see clients on their lunch breaks in their office or at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when they have a moment instead of having to leave in the middle of the day and drive somewhere. And of course, in Houston, we know about Houston traffic.
Yes, I think it's made it so much more accessible for people,
Mm,
who
mhm.
otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to prioritize getting out of the office.
That's so right. So I think it's really been, not that we ever want to say anything positive about a global pandemic, but there, we do look for silver linings in negative
Yeah.
situations. And I'm a firm believer and evangelist of telehealth and the importance of it. And again, like you said, the increased accessibility for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I've loved your Instagram profile for a while. And so I had seen a couple posts that I was like, oh, I want to ask her about that. Oh, I want to ask her about this. Let me ask about that.
Yeah.
So, from one of your more recent ones, when you talked about chain analysis and kind of the movement towards change, I was curious about what some of the situations or issues were that you've recognized in your practice or in your experiences that hold people back when they're kind of in that contemplation stage of change. What is it that has somebody say like, "Nah, I'm gonna keep where I am right now. I'm not ready for change." What does that look like for you?
I think there are several different factors, but I think the ones that I see most often that keep people kind of stuck where they're at, I think, fear is a huge factor. I think a lot of folks fear that maybe they don't have enough motivation to sustain the changes that they want
Mhm.
to make, or even
Mhm.
what I see quite often too, because I work with so many, high achievers and perfectionists, is that they fear that if they try to change, that they could fail, and so it's almost easier not to try, and then you don't risk failing, so it's
Right.
safer.
Right. Oh my goodness, that is so interesting that you say that. Because I think I've seen that a lot too. Both two things. One is that we set the bar so high, especially with people who are used to being accomplished and achieving and setting a goal and finding a way to do it. Professionally, intellectually, from an education standpoint. And then when it comes to something like an eating habit, and they're like, okay, I'm cutting out carbs and I'm only going to eat between these hours of the day, and and I want to, obviously everyone knows this, but I want to say I'm not a dietitian or a registered nutritionist, so I'm not giving advice, but I am saying I've had people come and they'll say something and I'm like, and so let's talk about realistically how that's going to look for you.
Yeah.
Because you do, and I have people who are, they get these boxed diets that were prescribed by their doctor, or again, no carbs or whatever that might be. And so it's like, I've lost 20 pounds and I feel great. And then it's like, but then I gained 25 back.
Right. Like they're not sustainable. And so then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm worried about starting this new thing because what if I can't sustain it too?
Yes. Yeah. And so we talk about, these small, measurable, action oriented, and realistic pieces that we can do that start bringing us towards something. And I think that's what's been very helpful for people in being more willing to change, because that fear is very real.
Oh, yeah.
I need to memorize this quote because I've used it before on this show and I don't get it right. It's like, when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of fear,
Ooh.
that's when change occurs.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's said more
Yeah.
eloquently than
That's
that,
like
but
the gist of it.
right,
Okay.
you get the idea. Yeah, because people have that fear, and if I do something, and also too, sometimes giving up the bad habits or the things that we enjoy, that's difficult too. Sometimes we, as much as we recognize maybe it's maladaptive or not the healthiest choice, some of it's a good, like, we enjoy that. And so figuring out a way to get past that hurdle. And then of course, obviously that fear of change as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, people with eating disorders, that is something we see a lot too, is that
Mhm.
there's a lot of benefits that they're getting from the eating disorder.
Mhm.
Sometimes they get lots of praise for the way that they look. And so that can be really hard to want to give that up.
Right. Absolutely. I watched recently that what was it called? Fallen Angel, The Rise and Fall of Victoria's Secret on Hulu.
Oh, yes.
I have no stake in that. I'm not a paid sponsor. I wish Hulu sponsored this podcast. Okay. They do not. But I watched that and I thought it was really interesting. I went to undergrad. I graduated high school in 03, graduated undergrad in 07. I'm like prime person of the aughts. Like that was my late teens, early 20s. And I was watching a lot of that and I was like, yeah, that messaging really worked on me. We were really informed that your love handles dictated your worth as a human. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, you're on the honor roll at Purdue. That's cool. But
Right.
like, what do your boobs look like?
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, but this is more important.
Truly. And so it's been really interesting. If you don't mind me giving a little personal disclosure, it's been a really interesting journey for me from that era. Of course, the 90s, the Kate Moss of it all.
Mhm.
And then having two children. I was very lucky after my first. I wish we would get rid of this expression. I bounced back, big air
Uh-huh.
quotes there, after the first little one. Breastfeeding, I could eat literally whatever I want. So I was deeply into my binge eating disorder because I was like, I could eat whatever I want. And
The
it just
chance.
magically took off, all of magic. And then with my second child, had another C-section, and everyone warned me of the C-section overhang. And I was like, I didn't have that with the first one. I don't have that problem. And then of course I'm, older now and body's changed. And so I really work on that self-talk of, my body has produced two tiny humans and nourished them in a way that I had hoped that would be possible. But then the Victoria's Secret of it all, and I hate to bash entirely Victoria's Secret, that they weren't alone in the
Yeah, they're just the representation of this whole
if I
movement.
may, yes, they're kind of the amalgam of all of the different pieces in this one quick way to describe it. But yeah, and I see that with a lot of other people too, that it's recognizing like, how do we talk about the strength that our bodies have? How do we talk about the things that our body, it's a privilege to be able to move in so many of the ways,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example, the abilities that I do have, and recognizing that our self-worth is not in that, while also recognizing, balancing that, the health aspects of movement and eating and post-body. Again, I wish we could get rid of bounce back. People use that
Oh,
term so much. Oh, how long did it take you to bounce back from having a baby and all of that kind of
right. Right.
language, that yucky language that I don't love. So, so yeah, it's been really interesting for me. Like I said, I appreciate you letting me have a little self-disclosure moment there, but it's very interesting as I work with a lot of elder millennials that I call it the Oregon Trail generation, right?
Yes.
The Oregon Trail millennials, and even some younger people, and recognizing how we work on changing that self-talk and that view, and recognizing now that we consume more external content more than just, the magazines at the grocery checkout, and it's on our phone in our face 24
Constantly.
7.
Yes.
Yeah. So definitely trying to find the benefits of recognizing the benefits of the negative patterns that we've established, getting away, finding the way to entice ourselves, finding that motivation.
Mhm.
And I talk about this a lot too, but the action before motivation, right? That's a big thing with clients who I have experienced depression. They hope that one day they'll roll out of bed and be like, this is the day. Here we
Magic.
go.
Yes.
And I'm like, that day's likely not gonna come.
Yeah.
So how do we get our feet on the floor and get the ball rolling
Mhm.
while we lack that motivation, and kind of reframing the way that we view motivation and view what it is we're going to do to make that change. So yeah, I really appreciated like I said, I've appreciated some of your posts on talking about the ways that chain analysis, especially. Y'all go check out. It's from August 5th. Go back and check it out on her profile. We'll talk. All of your contact will be in the show notes, of course, about kind of recognizing that pattern and moving forward and what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Another post, and from your article from Giddy about the meteoric rise of eating disorders, especially during the pandemic. I'd love to hear more, kind of what motivated you to write that article. What does the research look like? What's going on in that world?
Yeah, a big thing that I noticed, of course, I'm friends with a lot of other eating disorder professionals, dietitians, physicians, therapists, and
Mhm.
we've all had, multiple conversations about just how we're seeing this pattern of people that come in and they tell us, this all started when I was at home during the quarantine period, or like this all started, right around COVID. And so we had all kind of noticed that this was happening, and you're hearing kind of rumors of it too. And so I've had several conversations about, like, why is this happening? What's going on? What are y'all seeing with your clients? And, it seems like we really like to say that eating disorders are kind of like the perfect storm of factors that just come
Mm,
about. And I
mm,
think that's what happened with the pandemic. It was just this kind of unfortunate, we say perfect, but it's
right,
unfortunate
right.
set of circumstances where it really put people who, maybe wouldn't otherwise have been as vulnerable to developing an eating disorder um,
Mhm,
in that situation. So, people are spending more time at home, they're feeling isolated, um, they're
mhm.
feeling lonely. And what do you do when you feel isolated and lonely? Sometimes you eat because it's comforting.
Right.
Sometimes, we're seeing folks who are like, well, I just went ahead and worked out for, 6 hours a day because I didn't have anything else to do.
Uh-huh.
And so then, things like that. Um, Folks who are like, well, I've always wanted to start a diet. So I started a diet and now it's spiraled out of control because I have nothing to do but count my calories.
Right. Right.
And so it's kind of just people have encountered all of this extra time, all of these extra emotions that maybe they don't
Mhm.
know how to handle.
Right.
And that's kind of I think culminated in this huge uptick in eating disorders.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because kind of going back, we talked about like sustainability. Do you now have 6 hours to work out?
Right.
Right. So this year or however long it was that you had this situation, and now as we've really mostly gotten away from quarantine and that sustainability, of course, we talk about, now you'll have to help me with the expression, like it's exercise binge disorder. What is, there's like an exercise disorder
Yeah.
eating. I apologize, I've forgotten the expression for it.
We kind of just refer to it as either like excessive
Okay.
exercise, or, you can kind of consider it as a form of bulimia, because you're purging
Yes.
via getting rid of calories.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That the bulimia was the word that I was missing there, because
Yes.
I remember that I've heard some people use it in that way. And I think it's really recognizing the more education that we have is so important, because I don't think people are aware. They're like, what, I'm working out, I'm healthy. What are you talking? I'm like, yeah, but you're
Right.
working out 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And what is the purpose of that? I think also too, you hear a lot of people like, well, I ate that piece of birthday cake yesterday, so I got to work out this much more tomorrow. And that relationship that people
Yes.
have with working out and their eating habits.
Right, exactly. It kind of goes back to what you were saying about, you know, whereas a lot of these things sound like they're really great behaviors to begin with, like, right, everyone wants to work out a little bit, everyone wants to, cook more meals or
Mm.
eat, cleaner. Um,
Mhm.
but is it sustainable? Is it affecting your lifestyle, and how is it impacting your functioning?
Absolutely. Yes. And of course, too, we talk about, you mentioned tracking calories, and it's interesting because I do encourage people to monitor like moods, triggers, emotions, actions. What was the activating event that led to this thing, that led to that action, this feeling that led to this action? And so that can be very helpful as we have those data points to reflect back upon. And I do appreciate that certain people see some benefit in tracking their calories. And then I definitely know some people who, when they're doing that, it becomes obsessive.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and it becomes maladaptive. Whereas, your MyFitnessPal, your Fitbit, insert the thousands, I'm sure, of food tracking and exercise tracking apps that exist,
Uh-huh.
that can be an adaptive use of that. And then when people, it's that self-awareness piece of like checking in with yourself and making sure, is this still serving me, or am I serving it in some way, moving forward? Because I definitely have had some clients in the past, and I am not any sort of disordered eating specialist, right? I have referred people out when I feel like perhaps they need something a little more specialized. But of course, the same with any other thing, right? Where your clients have experiences with trauma
Oh,
and with substance, yeah, right? So we're able as therapists
kind
to
of just
touch.
comes up, and yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I've had clients in the past too, where I'm like, let's check and see if perhaps maybe this has gotten out of hand. Maybe this is
Yes,
no longer serving you. Yeah.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you checking or talking with me about that. And I have kind of already touched on, I was going to bring up again that chain analysis piece from August 5th, y'all. Go check it out. Go look at that beautiful graphic, about the importance of tracking that, and how does that work for you, with your clients? What do you see as the benefit of that? I said I kind of already touched on the data points and everything, but how does that help people move forward?
I have a lot of clients come in and say, they don't know how to stop this behavior. Like, they have the motivation, they have, the drive to want to stop, or get better or whatever, but they don't know where to begin, or what that would look like. And
Yeah.
so I really love chain analysis because it
Mhm.
helps people to kind of really problem solve, ways that they can prevent engaging in that behavior. You could kind of review the various factors that have led up to that behavior, and then you can also review the consequences that have come as a result of that behavior. And so really just kind of laying it all out there. I know I'm a very visual person,
Yes.
and so when I see that, I'm like, oh great, here and here we can do XYZ going forward.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love that. I'm a visual person as well. I like to be, and I like to be task oriented as much as I can be. It's a very interesting paradox because I work with perinatal mental health, and I took a beautiful training with the godmother of perinatal mood disorders, Karen Kleiman, over in Pennsylvania. I did it virtually, didn't have to fly to Pennsylvania. And she talks about the art of holding, where you just kind of sit with the person and let that space be. And it's funny because I came into that with a solution-focused brief therapy mindset.
Oh,
So a lot of my, right? So like, I don't want to say it's a paradox. They're not mutually exclusive, but
yes.
a lot of my clients really do come into me and they're like, what can I do? What are my, and so I find that to be very helpful. And again, I think every conversation with every client has its moment, has its space. So sometimes I'm holding somebody one week and the next week we're talking about mood trackers or a chain analysis or some combination even within the same session. But
it's a balance.
Everything is, I say it all the time. Rarely is any one thing just one thing.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
We're often operating, it's not black or white. I used to say functioning in the gray, but I had an LCSW supervisee once who talked about operating in the rainbow. And so I like to use that.
Ooh,
Thanks, Juan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we can kind of bring ourselves away from things needing to be just one thing, it can always be very helpful. So operating in the rainbow where we can. But yeah, I think that's very helpful. And like you mentioned, the data points, being able to reflect back can kind of show us. And I've even had people in the past recognize like, well, when I stopped tracking my mood is when I realized that's when my mood was the worst, because I'm like, why didn't I track that for a whole week? Oh, I remember that week. this and this happened, and I was and I just didn't have the energy, the attention. I forgot whatever it was. So yeah, I really love that. And I love that we kind of have a similar modality there.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So understanding, of course, as we know, no one thing is ever just one thing, but understanding every person has a unique journey and experiences that bring them to where they are. What are some kind of common themes that you've noticed in working with people in your specialization and with disordered eating and other issues?
One thing that I continue to be impressed by, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, is that I work with a lot of high achieving, perfectionistic folks, and there used to be, and I think there still is a little bit, there used to be this very big misconception in kind of the eating disorder realm that people who were struggling with eating disorders were just, very vain, or, they were solely concerned about their appearance. And what I find is that it's actually kind of quite the opposite. Like, very self-critical. They're constantly feeling like they're not good enough and they need to work harder and do better. And I think, the eating disorder is just a function of that, rather than, oh, I just want to look the best that I can. Like, sometimes that's a piece of it, but it's never really the whole picture.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that when you say it like that, it just kind of clicked in my brain about like, obviously, if a person had such deep self-worth that they knew their worth, right, they wouldn't be in a space of trying to please the world,
right,
from a visual perspective, or whatever that might be. And so it is nice to be able to advocate in that way so that people can be educated, so that people can be supportive of their loved ones.
yes.
Because that is, I do hear that a lot too, when people try to reach out for help or support and perhaps even some accountability of their loved ones. And they get that feedback of,
Yeah.
stop being so vain, or this is so, whatever it might be.
Why are you so worried about your appearance?
Exactly. So when we can speak from a place of knowledge, that is an understanding what that is. It's not just about that.
Yeah.
Again, I've said it how many times already? Not everything. It can be a little bit about like, look how good I look in this bathing suit. Sure.
Yes.
But that's not really the core of it. The core of it is that self-worth, that self-talk, how we want to present ourselves to the world, and being able to have that conversation with ourselves and being able to sit in our own skin.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Well, I can't thank you enough. My brain is already swimming with the ideas of our second episode. So hopefully I can maybe ask you back in the future for
Oh, I
another.
would love that.
I'd love
Yes.
that so much. So tell the fans, tell the family, where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me. I'm on Instagram. It's just at Relief and Recovery. And my website is reliefandrecoverypllc.com. You can go in there, always shoot me an email if you want to contact me. Super easy.
Amazing. Well, and those will be in the show notes as well. And again, I've referenced a couple of your articles as well. So everyone, that was August 5th. And then let me pull it up real quick. It was from Giddy was, oh, well, I didn't write down what date that was. So I apologize to the readers. I'll try to find that. Anyway, so we'll find that in the show notes. But
It's
thank you.
pretty recent. Yeah.
Yes, it's a pretty recent one. So about the meteoric rise of eating disorders in quarantine. So I thank you again. Thanks to everyone who is tuning in, for the family out there. Be curious, not judgmental, and have a great one.